When Hamilton County Assistant Prosecutor Melissa Powers took the stand, Joseph Paul Franklin began looking tense. Powers is the woman who got Franklin to admit on audio tape that he murdered Dante Evans Brown and Darrell Lane.
I did it. I just, the only thing I can say is I did do it.
And can you also tell me why you did it?
I was trying to get rid of all the ugly people in the world.
Okay.
And
why did you
I
select?
consider the blacks the ugliest people of all.
The victim's family listened to the confession, hearing Franklin describe in a casual, even cold way how he boys.
I just put the gun right on the biggest dude first, and fired one shot with that 44 Magnum. And so, I just heard somebody go, make a sound like like they just got shot, And as soon as the other guy bolted, it was just like through a miracle that I got him, man. I did not even aim the gun at him, man. As soon as he heard that shot, he just bolted and started running, and I aimed the gun without even, just in the dark there, just hoping that I would get a lucky shot and hit him, And sure enough, it actually got him, man.
What exactly is this thing that we call racism, white supremacy? Looking at why do white people behave in the way that they do. You see, in concluding that it has to do, number one, with their minority status on the planet, their genetic recessive status, in that they could experience genetic annihilation, in that the overwhelming majority of people on the planet are black, brown, red, and yellow. And whites constitute fewer than 1/10 of the people on the planet.
We cannot bring them back. Dr. Tauber said of the estimated 20 million civilians who died in Nazi labor and concentration camps. Whereas I'm not an invited scholar nor a petitioner to attend the Tauber Institute at Brandeis University. I've been a student of anti-Semitism in Europe and the destruction of the Semites of the Jewish religion since the mid-1950s. Throughout that time, I remained convinced that the treatment of the Semites of the Jewish religion in Europe and in America was intimately related to the gradual destruction of black people, as well as the millions of native peoples found in the Americas by the immigrating whites from Europe, a pattern which continues to the present. Further, I was convinced that the final solution for the Semites in Europe was associated with the atomic bomb solution for the Japanese peoples in World War II, and that the anti-Semitism of Europe and America was intimately related to the apartheid of Southern Africa and to the historic pattern of treatment or mistreatment of all of the peoples classified as non-white or non-Aryan people by the people who classified themselves as white or Aryan. Welcome back. Happy Monday. Welcome to another episode. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants, as I am continuing my reading of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing's The ISIS Papers, The Keys to Colors. This week, I'm reading chapters 18 and 19, and this will be, I have basically after this, including this video, there'll be 3 videos left covering this book. The way the book is written, I want to cover it in a specific, I want to cover the chapters that go together. So today I'll be covering 18 and 19, and chapter 18, written in 1980, is the Crest theory of the Holocaust. So start the video off. Can't think of the guy's name right now, but he's labeled as a racist serial killer. And you saw in the video how he said, how he explained what he did, and he explained why he did it. He said his mission was to get all of the ugly people off of the earth. And he considered black people as the ugliest people. And he had a drive and a need to eliminate black people because he felt that they were inferior and ugly. So this is just an example of what Dr. Francis Cress Welsing is talking about in her book, about white people who subscribe to white supremacy, their drive to prevent genetic annihilation. Black people are ugly. Black people are inferior. Ultimately, what he's saying is black people are the biggest threat to our genetic survival, according to the Crest theory. All right. So let's dive back into it. So she goes on to say, one of the serious flaws in Western logic, thought, and scholarship is the failure or inability to see things as a whole. Rather, the tendency is to perceive fragmented abstractions that are never united as one. And so she's saying that because she believes that, as I read earlier, that all of these patterns of catastrophic behavior, terroristic behavior, that's what I want to say. All of these patterns of terroristic behavior are linked. They're all related. They're all related to a specific drive, a specific need. They're not isolated events. If you look at them as isolated events, you will miss the overall picture. You're missing the whole forest because you're concentrating on the tree. The united field theory, what I talked about a couple videos ago, when she talked about a couple chapters ago, the united field theory, what Einstein was getting at, that everything is connected. So if everything is connected, everything within the system of white supremacy is connected to the mindset, the thought, and the drive to prevent genetic annihilation. All right. So she also goes on to say, this pattern of thought is sharply contrasted to the Eastern mode of thinking and perception that begins with the perception and analysis of the whole, so as to place in accurate perspective any parts of fragments which may be isolated from the whole. The focus on the destruction of the Semites of the Jewish religion as an abstraction outside of the context of the totality of the historic Western civilization and cultural imperative, the past 2,000 years at least, explains why there has not been to date a comprehensive understanding of the Semitic destruction in Europe from 1933 to 1945. Indeed, the Tabor Institute at Brandeis University will not find the answers it seeks. The $800,000 grant that they have, notwithstanding at the time, with the limited historical perspective of only 150 years of history of Semites in Europe. So what she's getting at from her, from the conclusion of her studies, is what happened with Adolf and them during that time in that place in the Holocaust. All of that happened. She is saying that she believes it's connected to the overall fear of white genetic annihilation, because the Jewish people are considered, or Jewish people are Semites. And because they are Semites, that means they're classified as non-white. And if white people classify them as non-white, then in her opinion, they will also be targets. And hence, that's why she's saying everything is connected. That's why she's saying you can't look at the destruction of the Caribbean, the natives in the Caribbean, or the natives in the Americas, or the natives throughout the Americas, or the destruction of what happened to people in Africa when Europeans showed up, or even what happened in the Holocaust, what happened with apartheid, like all the things that you can see globally that had a white hand in it, and the destruction of all non-white people. She's saying it is all connected. If you are considered non-white, then you would be a threat. And if you are a threat, then you have to be eliminated. That's what she's saying. She also goes on to say, this essay then is for all Black people and for others who wish to understand the destruction of the Semites and gypsies in Europe between 1933 and 1945. It is a presentation of the critical datum that will totally clarify once and for all why there was anti-Semitism in Europe, and why a final solution for the Semites as well as for the gypsy population in Europe was needed. It is necessary at this point to reiterate the key issues of the Crest theory of color confrontation and racism. And to hammer that point home, let me do this. Let me do this and hammer this point home.
When Hamilton County Assistant Prosecutor Melissa Powers took the stand, Joseph Paul Franklin began looking tense. Powers is the woman who got Franklin to admit on audio tape that he murdered Dante Evans Brown and Darrell Lane.
I did it. You know, I just, the only thing I can say is I did do it.
And can you also tell me why you did it?
I was trying to get rid of all the ugly people in the world.
Okay.
And
why did you
I
select?
consider the blacks the ugliest people of all.
The victim's family
Hey, this is what she's talking about. So let's get back into what she's saying, right? So the white supremacy necessity is to establish, maintain, expand, and refine the power equation: white over non-white, white power over all peoples with an ancestral history or substantial melanin skin pigmentation that can be genetically transmitted. The white genetic phenotype can be maintained on the planet Earth only through this means: intensive genetic watch. Hence, the serial killer guy saying he has to get rid of the ugly people in the world. He has to also think about this too. He has to dehumanize us as well. He has to see us as non-white. As non-human. They already see us as non-white, but they have to see us as non-human. So they're the ugly people of the world. Black people are the ugly people of the world. And because black people are the ugly people of the world, then I can't see them as human, because us humans, as white people, what he's saying, us white people we're beautiful people. And if white people are beautiful, then non-white people have to be ugly. It's the rationale behind the thinking. It has to be justified in some kind of way. If I see you as human, if I see you as equal to me, then it will be a lot more difficult for me to eliminate you. But if I see you as less than me, then it's easy. The implications of the Crest theory are that all behavior patterns in the global white collective begin and end with the conscious and or unconscious consideration of white genetic survival and the corollary consideration of the global threat of white genetic annihilation by the non-white majority. Where this is not the foremost consideration of the global white collective, a white population would not exist on the planet Earth. It would have succumbed to the white genetic annihilation and therefore would have been an organized psychological and military defense. So what you're getting at is let me read that again. Were this not the foremost consideration of the global white collective, a white population would not exist on the planet Earth. It would have succumbed to the white genetic annihilation and therefore never would have been an organized psychological and military defense. So she's saying in some way, somehow, she believes that all white people, all classified white people on the planet played a part in the white supremacy structure being built and being maintained over the millennia, over the centuries. She doesn't believe that the system of white supremacy could have existed this long if all white people have not played a part in it somehow, some way, whether consciously or subconsciously, especially going back to the idea of total genetic survival based off the fear of genetic annihilation. A Semite is conveniently defined as a member of any of the people whose language is Semitic, including the Hebrews, Arabs, Assyrians, Phoenicians, Babylonians, etc. Webster's New World Dictionary, the adjective Semitic is defined as, the first definition is of characteristics of or like a Semite or the Semites. The second definition is designing or of a major group of languages of Southwestern Asia or Northern Africa related to the Hamitic languages and divided into East Semitic, Akkadian, Northwest Semitic, Phoenician, Punic, Aramaic, Hebrew, Modern Hebrew, etc., and Southwest Semitic, Arabic, Ethiopic, and Amharic. Webster's New World Dictionary also informs us that the prefix semi is akin to hemi or sami, means half, as in a semi-diameter. Thus, both of the words Semite and Hamite, the latter from the Greek Hamite, could refer to peoples who were black, but a mulatto type mixture of black and white and combination thereof, hence semi or hemi, half black and half white, much like the present mixed black or colored population in the US, or wherever white males have sexually aggressed against African black females. A fine example is the Roman white soldiers, their sexual aggression against African women. Am I decoding the word Semite as from the Latin prefix semi, means someone whose ancestry was a black and white mixture, therefore black, since black is genetically dominant. So that's what she's getting at. So basically explaining what a Semite is and using the Webster's dictionary. So white people, according to the Webster's dictionary, are classifying a person who they would deem as a Semite as a person who would be a mixture of black and white. And so she believes that because these people are a mixture of black and white, they are considered non-white, and they too would be a target of white supremacy. So anybody who is non-white will be a target for white supremacy. Now check this out. And this is from the Washington Post, May of 1979, in an article titled "Pope to View Poland's Black Madonna." The mysterious Black Madonna of Czechoslovakia is the most sacred icon in Poland. It is also one of the most haunting and beautiful works of religious art in the world. Pope John Paul II, a strong advocate of devotion of the Virgin Mary, will travel to the Hilltop Monastery in June to show his special devotion to the strange painting depicting Christ's mother as a black woman. Art experts believe that Madonna was painted between the 6th and 8th centuries and say the style is reminiscent of early Egyptian Christians. Many art historians believe the Madonna is one of the rare black Madonnas still existing. Most of the Madonnas painted in the earlier centuries of Christendom were black, according to historians, and it wasn't until the Renaissance that it became popular to give the mother of the Christ the features of the Florentine maiden. And basically what they mean by the Florentine maiden is giving her white woman features. The Madonna and Child was originally black, and the popes went up to worship, and they still go up to worship the Black Madonna and Child. But during the Renaissance, after white people expelled the Moors, especially after the Moors were expelled from Spain, and Europe started to flourish in the way that it is now, they started to replace anything that resembled blackness with whiteness, whitewashing. Because, according to Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, the fear of genetic annihilation. In the diaspora of the Semites of the Jewish religion, after the Babylonian exile 2,000 years or so ago, Semites left Africa and went to Europe. With continuing genetic admixture with the Europeans, white population operating under the definition of the Jew is anyone whose mother is a Jew. It was possible if enough white males had sexual intercourse with a sufficient number of Semitic or colored women for the once black population of Semites to become progressively lighter and lighter. All offspring from these white males and Semitic women of the Jewish religion then would become Jews. So basically, mixture, when you mix black and white, you're going to get a mixture that's not white. All right? Basically. It is significant to this discussion that Karl Marx, now listen to this, she's going, because in this time, she's going into talking about popular Semitic intellectuals who had black features. It is significant to this discussion that Karl Marx, another Semite of the Jewish religion, had such dark skin that his children called him the Moor, meaning, of course, the black. Robert Hellbronner, in his book, The Worldly Philosopher, states, in contrasting the appearance of Marx to his co-worker Frederick Engels, they were very much opposite in appearance. Marx looked like a revolutionary. His children called him the Moor, for his skin was dark and his eyes deep set and flushing. Basically, he had African features. Karl Marx had African features. That's why they called them the Moor. Prior to reading Hellbroner, I always had been impressed by the great similarity in appearance of Frederick Douglass, the pre-Civil War black orator, and Karl Marx. Basically, Frederick, according to Dr. Welsing, Karl Marx and Frederick Douglass, they had features that resembled each other, according to her. She says another Semitic of the Jewish religion who was identified as a black was Albert Einstein. So Albert Einstein also had the features that resembled people who were non-white. Einstein, the great Nobel Prize physicist, as documented by Robert Clark's Einstein, the life and times was once described as broad-shouldered with a slight stoop. His short skull seems remarkably broad. His complexion is swarthy. Webster's New Word Dictionary defines the word swarthy as having a dark skin or dusky skin. So somebody who is seen as swarthy or tawny seems to have a darker hue to their skin. They have more coarse hair. They may have more full lips, more broad nose, and more dark skin, more African or Africoid features. This was a description of Einstein in his middle 30s. Crispy and frizzled hair is one half step away from kinky hair. Again, we see in the person of the most prominent Semitic descriptive features that are associated with the genetic stock of the African continent: swarthy skin and crispy frizzled hair. Then she goes in to talk about Sigmund Freud and some of the features that Sigmund Freud had. Some people deemed some of Freud's features as having non-white features, would be Africoid features. Sigmund Freud idolized Hannibal. And so this is from Frank Sulloway. It says, did Freud build his own legend? And this is so this comes from July 23rd of 1979 in the Time Book Review of Freud, Biologists of the Mind, entitled, Did Freud Build His Own Legend? Frank Sulloway, he revealed Sigmund Freud idolized Hannibal so much that for years he was psychologically unable to enter Rome because Hannibal had never set foot in the city. It is interesting that Sigmund Freud, a Semite of the Jewish religion, should identify himself with Hannibal. Hannibal was a black man. So Frank Sulloway is intrigued by the fact that Freud has such an affinity for Hannibal, because Frank Sulloway sees Freud as a white person. Now, the world may not see Freud as a white person, and the rest of the white world may not see Freud as a white person, but clearly this person is seeing Freud as a white person. So in him seeing Freud as a white person, he doesn't get it why Freud has such an affinity with Hannibal. Maybe Freud has an unconscious or maybe a conscious connection with some of his genetics that are linked to Hannibal's genetics. And so Dr. Welsing also goes on to say, each of these representatives, Semites of the Jewish religion, either has identified himself or has been identified by others with blackness, primarily because the Jews in Africa 2,000 years ago were black African people. That is the reason that all of the earliest paintings of the Madonna and Child, the Jesus and the Mother, were a black Madonna and Child. They were Africans. So, I mean, no argument with me there that the early, Jews, there were black Jews, there were African Jews. There's no argument with me there. Maybe on some of the origins, but the existence, no. There's no argument with me there. So she's saying because there were Africans, or the early Jews were Africans, then there's a good chance that even present day Jews have African blood in them. Hence the swarthy or the tawny complexions that are deemed, especially by those who practice white supremacy. Because you got to remember, at the end of the day, it's the white people who practice white supremacy. The white people who uphold the tenets of white supremacy. The white people who are on the mission of eliminating any threat they see to their genetic survival. It's those people who classify the world. And if they classify you as non-white, then they will see you as a threat, no matter how you see yourself. If they see you as a threat, they will see you as a threat. And as a threat, they will do what they need to do to feel safe. Semites of the European experience may want and may have wanted in the past to forget their Black ancestral heritage and suppress this truth. But the global white collective has never forgotten this critical fact. Like I just said, the people who uphold the tenets of white supremacy don't care how others view themselves or how others classify themselves. It's how they classify them. And if they see you as non-white, they're going to see you as a threat. So Adolf, other Germans and Europeans, all of whom were whites, were aware, even though Adolf wasn't really a white. Adolf was a Semite himself. They were aware, consciously, subconsciously, or unconsciously, of the greater origin of the Semites. No matter how light-skinned many of them may have become over 2,000 years of miscegenation with the whites or Aryans, Adolf and his followers not only mandated the destruction of the Semites, but also the destruction of the Gypsies. And Webster's New World definition defined Gypsy as a short for Egyptian, so-called because thought to have come from Egypt, a member of a wandering Caucasian people with dark skin and black hair found throughout the world. So this is an important point here. And this is something I've been telling people for a while, like especially when I really got into geography and I really start understanding geography and things like that, and the people that come from these regions and the origins of these peoples. And this for me started like in middle school. I've been a geography nerd since middle school, right? But the difference between a European and a Caucasian. Now, I know we often use Caucasian and European, or Caucasian and white. In this instance, let's say white. So we often use Caucasian and white as interchangeable terms, but they're not interchangeable terms. They're really classifying two different people. So often Caucasian is used to refer to dark-skinned non-white peoples who may have straight hair. However, white means white and Caucasian means Caucasian. So Caucasian doesn't necessarily mean white, even though we, especially black people, we use it interchangeably. Caucasians by the white collective who uphold the white supremacy system. They don't see the Caucasians as white. They see them as non-white, because Caucasian is used to refer to dark-skinned non-white peoples who may have straight hair. All right. The specific fear of white genetic annihilation, while always present in the global white collective, becomes more prominent and is more frequently acted upon in times when whites have lost a war and or when there is serious economic uncertainty. At these times, the white collective feels insecure because the major groups for the sense of white invincibility and for white genetic survival, their guns and money seem to have failed. So read that again. The specific fear of white genetic annihilation, while always present in the global white collective, becomes more prominent and is more frequently acted upon in times when whites have lost a war and or when there is serious economic uncertainty. At these times, the white collective feels insecure because the major props for the sense of white invincibility and for white genetic survival, their guns and money, seems to have failed. So the major things that they use to project their sense of superiority, the guns and money have failed. Since the guns and money have failed, seemingly in the short term, well, war now is inevitable. Thus, after the Germans' loss of World War I, which was followed by political instability, high-level inflation, and high-level unemployment, there appeared on the scene a dynamic spokesperson, articulating the need to destroy those perceived as capable of ultimate white destruction. In the United States, we are in such a period. And remember, this was written in hold on, lost my page. This was written in 1980. In the United States, we're in such a period. There has been the loss of the Vietnam War, a war lost to non-white people, followed by political instability, with the example she uses, Watergate. And there is high-level inflation and unemployment. Now, we're not that far away from a lot of these things here, right? So, and remember, there is Ukraine was invaded, right? we whiteness increasing. I don't know, might be a typo. So thus, with whiteness increasing levels of activity of Nazis, skinheads, and the KKK, and other spokespersons such as Nobel Prize laureate Dr. William Shockley articulating the need to get rid of black people and discussing black genetic inferiority. Some also focus in this Some also focus in the Semites as a problem. Basically, all non-white people are a problem to them. All non-white people. No matter how you feel, no matter what you tell yourself, they see you as a problem. Okay, so basically she's getting at all of this is, if you are classified as non-white, then you must understand the world that you live in. And in understanding the world that you live in, you must be prepared to protect yourself. You must be prepared to defend yourself. If you build it, you must protect it. Never disrespect. And this is for my black folk. This last part for me is for my black folk. Never disrespect or be ashamed of the black genetic heritage of Africa, and speak up for, own up to, protect and defend the heritage with your very life. Should conditions and events ever call you up to do so, be proud to be black and be proud to be non-white. Be proud to be black and be proud to be non-white. Be proud to be black and be proud to be non-white. Never disrespect or be ashamed of the black genetic heritage of Africa, and speak up for, own up to, protect and defend that heritage with your very life. Just explain it. Let me one more time for the.
When Hamilton County Assistant Prosecutor Melissa Powers took the stand, Joseph Paul Franklin began looking tense. Powers is the woman who got Franklin to admit on audio tape that he murdered Dante Evans Brown and Darrell Lane.
I did it. I just, the only thing I can say is I did do it.
And can you also tell me why you did it?
I was trying to get rid of all the ugly people in the world.
Okay.
And
why did you
I
select?
consider the blacks the ugliest people of all.
The victim's family listened to the confession, hearing Franklin describe in a casual, even cold way how he shot the boys.
I just put the gun right on the biggest dude first, and fired one shot with that 44 Magnum. And so, I just heard somebody make a sound like they just got shot, And as soon as the other guy bolted, it was just like through a miracle that I got him, man. I did not even aim the gun at him, man. As soon as he heard that shot, he just bolted and started running, and I aimed the gun without even, just in the dark there, just hoping that I would get a lucky shot and hit him, And sure enough, it actually got him, man.
Chapter 19, The Neurochemical Basis for Evil, written in 1988. The American philosopher William James stated, "There is no doubt that healthy mindedness is inadequate as a philosophical doctrine, because the evil facts which it positively refuses to account for are a genuine portion of reality, and they may, after all, be the best key to life's significance and possibly the only openers for our eyes to the deepest levels of truth." What does that mean? Well, we're going to find out. Let's get deeper into it. So the Kabbalah, which literally means tradition, is the sum of the Jewish mysticism and tradition of things divine. The book Bahir in 11 AD documented on the Kabbalah concerning Satan states, it teaches that there is in God a principle that is called evil, and it lies in the north of God. Of it is written in Jeremiah 1:14, out of the north the evil shall break forth upon all the inhabitants of the land. This is to say, all evil that comes upon all the inhabitants of the lands break forth out of the north. And what principle is this? It is the form of the hand, one of the 7 holy forms which represent God as the original man. And it has many messengers, and all are named evil. And it is they that find that it is they that fling to the world into guilt, for the tubo is to the north, and the tubo means precisely the evil that confuses men until they sin, and it is the source of all man's evil impulses. So what does evil, God, and white supremacy, what does all this have to do with each other? How is all of this connected? Well, let's dive in. Let's dive. In early Egyptian African traditions, evil was associated with Set, the brother of Osiris, Lord of the Perfect Black. Set eventually killed his brother Osiris and dismembered his body, which his sister wife Isis helped restore to life. Osiris was the great Egyptian god figure. Set is considered the white brother. In contrast, the early Christian religion and the Bible revealed evil to the fallen angel Lucifer, a word that means light and that can be construed to mean white. However, in the Middle Ages, for some Europeans, the evil took on an appearance of a black man with a long phallus, which has been modified as the present red colored figure with the long tail with the long pitchfork. So, So God or evil in its early forms were associated with white, but now evil in its present form is associated with black. Well, why? Why is evil associated with black now? Evil was associated with white. And remember, evil not necessarily meaning destruction, but the polar opposite of good. Remember, we're also working with the law of opposites. Set and Osiris are ways that the laws of opposites were explained. Set representing the polar opposite end of Osiris. Set is the negative, Osiris is the positive. Two energies that have to exist for existence to be possible. Remember that. But now in the present form, evil literally means something bad. In the Western form, in the Western mind. In 1972, I presented a paper entitled Melanin, the Neurochemical Basis for the Soul. At the annual meeting of the National Medical Association section of Neurology and Psychiatry, I theorized that the presence of melanin in high concentrations in blacks accounted for some of the observable differences in behavior between black and white people, i.e. religious responsiveness, rhythm, emotional responsiveness, sensitivity levels, noticing that familiar sayings among older black people: the blacker the berry, the sweeter the sweeter the juice, and if it ain't got no soul, it ain't got no use. Also, I emphasized the song by James Brown, We Got More Soul. Further, I pointed out that the most sensitive body areas are the areas that are most highly pigmented. So, melanin may play a part in black people's morality and black people's way that we view the world, that we experience the world, even the way we carry ourselves in the world and our relation to the world on the spectrum of good and evil. 15 years ago, in a paper entitled Black Hypertension and the Active Skin Melanocyte, that was in the Journal of Urban Health in 1975. She says, I posted melanin, among other things, as a possible neurotransmitter and the skin melanocytes as the foundation of the sixth sense, the basis for knowledge of the unseen, including a deeper knowledge of bad. A deeper knowledge of bad. So melanated people have a deeper understanding of what good and bad is on not just a spiritual scale or a natural scale, but also a physical scale. So I explained that if the melanocytes were sense receptors and melanin was a neurotransmitter, then the darker the skin, the higher levels of hypertension's found. Primarily, this is true because people with darker skins are more sensitive to the energy currents around them. If those energy currents are stressful, they will be more stressed, increasing levels of hypertension. So think about the environments that Black people live in. A lot of Black people live in high stress environments, and a lot of people in those high stress environments have hypertension. Hypertension is one of the leading killers of Black people. She's on to something. In 1987, at the first Melanin Conference, I discussed the Crest theory on the George Washington Carver phenomenon, suggesting that the skin melanocytes of this very Black skin scientist, high-level concentration of melanin skin pigmentation, enable him to communicate with the energy frequencies emanating from the plants. Thus, he was able to learn their secrets and purposes. George Washington Carver did say he was able to communicate with the plants. I've read many stories, a lot of literature, a lot of articles, a lot of mythology, a lot of stuff that leads to suggesting, especially melanated people, not just African people, but different groups of melanated people who are able to communicate with nature. Some way, somehow, some shape or another, these melanated people had the ability to communicate with nature. And Dr. Welsing is asserting that the melanin in their skin being a neurotransmitter was one of the main reasons that they were able to communicate with nature, in addition to developing their sixth sense, because you have to develop your sixth sense. You have to develop it. It's like a muscle. You got to develop it. But if you develop that and you're melanated, you'll have a greater possibility and a greater chance to communicate with nature. She also goes on to say, I equate evil with chaos and destruction, especially the destruction of life. The word evil, when spelled backwards, is live. Opposite ends of the spectrum. The role of the psychiatric physician or physician scientist is to attempt to comprehend, bringing greater clarity and insight, the total spectrum of human behavior, which will include the special category of behavioral phenomena recognized as evil. All right. Further, I believe that the challenge of modern psychiatry, like the challenge of modern physics, is to approach, if possible, a view of the unified field. So she's thinking in linear logic, not circular logic. So what is, how and why is all of this connected? And how can we solve this? Because there's a connection. There's a connection. White genetic survival. It's the connection. It's the basis of the connection. So don't look at these things. Stop looking at racism as isolated incidents and find the commonality in it. You got to put the clues together. Got to be like detective work and putting all the clues together. For the ant, the greatest evil consists of killing ants. For the human being, the greatest evil consists of the obsessional degrading and killing of other human beings. All lesser evils are simply added to this, i.e. destruction of other life forms, destruction of the planet, and destruction that exists beyond the planet Earth. With evil so defined, clearly there is an overwhelming atmosphere of evil in the world. In fact, the entire planet exists in an atmosphere of degradation and murder. To ignore this evidence of evil, this obsession with mass killing and death, is only to participate in the establishment and the maintenance of its reality. In effect, to participate in evil. On the other hand, to address this obsession with mass death and degradation of human life in hopes of countering it is to affirm the dignity of human beings in the universe. If you act like the evil don't happen, then you are complicit. How do we stand against it? How do we stand up? Well, we got to get our stuff together first. Definitely got to get our stuff together. Racism is a team sport. That's one thing that she is explaining in this, that racism is a team sport. Keep looking at it as isolated incidents and keep approaching it as individuals, and you will never get to the solution. Get out of this circular logic. Get out of the circular logic and get into the linear logic, the linear thought. Start thinking solution-based. We need to start being solution-based. What is the solution to our issue? They are going to do whatever they need to do to ensure that they survive. So we should be doing the same things. However, before there can be effective struggle against evil, the following questions must be answered. This is for us. The first question is, what are the dynamic conditions in a society or culture that would stimulate such activity as announced as devil worship? Number two, what are the dynamics in the society? What are the dynamics in a society and culture wherein increasing numbers of black males are being killed daily and yearly at epidemic levels? Number three, what are the exact causation dynamics in a society and culture wherein the greatest percentage of its resources are used in the development and production of instruments of death and destruction? Number four, what are the exact dynamic conditions in a power system or culture wherein 50 million people can be destroyed in the course of slave trade as on the African continent? Number five, what are the exact dynamic conditions in the power system or culture wherein 6 million Semites of the Jewish religion can be destroyed deliberately, or 20 million people killed in the course of a war such as the Soviet Union during World War II? Number six, what are the dynamics in the society and culture in which hundreds of thousands, possibly millions, are doomed to die of infection with a virus that increasing numbers are coincide or concluding was deliberately man-made? And you know what virus they talking about. You know what virus is. Still, it's the number one, it's one of the things that highly affects black people now. Bloodborne pathogen. They're talking about HIV. These are questions that the psychiatrist should be motivated to answer. So she's also saying that all of our mental health professionals, all of our professionals, if you are a professional, me included, all of us who are professionals, all the work that we are doing should be solving our problems, solving our main problem, our biggest problem, which is white supremacy, racism, the fear of white genetic annihilation. Everything we do should work into understanding that and solving that for ourselves. It's not our job to end racism, but it is our job to solve our problem of racism, which is about the elimination and the destruction and degradation and oppression of us so white genetic survival can happen. One of the most disturbing facts that came out of the Adolf Eichmann trial was that a psychiatrist examined him and pronounced him as perfectly sane. We equate sanity with a sense of justice, with humaneness, with prudence, with the capacity to love and understand other people. We rely on the sane people of the world to preserve it from barbarism, madness, and destruction. And now it begins to dawn on us that it is precisely the same ones who are the most dangerous. It is the sane one, the well-adopted one, who can without qualms and without nausea aim the missiles and press the buttons that will initiate the great festival of destruction that they, the sane ones, have prepared. So crazy or evil don't always come in the same package. Sometimes evil comes as a polished, well-adapted, successful person who is adored by millions. Hence, dictators. They're very charismatic. Name me a dictator that wasn't charismatic. And look at his following. Evil does not always look unbecoming. Evil doesn't always look destructive. Evil doesn't always just say, hey, I'm evil. Nah, sometimes evil come in a nice package. So she goes on to talk about to explain evil a lot more, especially using Moby Dick as an example. Captain Ahab, his obsession with Moby Dick, and I'm gonna have to read that book again. So, but before we get to that, she says psychiatrist M. Scott Peck in his nationwide best-selling book, People of the Life, The Hope of the Healing Human Evil. He says, those of us who are Caucasians seem to have fewer complications about killing blacks or Indians or Orientals than we do in killing other fellow white men. It is easier for a white man to lynch an N-word than a redneck. The matter of the racial aspects of intraspecies killing is yet another one deserving significant scientific investigation. Basically, he's admitting that as a white person, it is easier to kill other non-white people. It's easier to eliminate other non-white people as a white person. That's what he's saying, because of the racial loyalty, the racial bias, the racial teamness, the racial oneness. They see themselves as one. They see themselves as human. If they classify you as white, they see you as human. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be casualties, because there is a hierarchy of importance. There will be casualties, but for the most part, why take their people out when they can take yours? He concludes war today is at least as much a matter of rational. He concludes war today is at least as much a matter of national pride as of racial pride. War is more about racial pride than national pride. This is what M. Scott Peck is saying. War, in his view, war is more about racial pride than national pride. So now we're getting into Herman Melville and his explanation of evil and Dr. Welsing's interpretation of his explanation as evil within the sense of race and racism, and Captain Ahab's obsession with killing the white whale, the albino whale. What is it that in the albino man so repels and often shocks the eye, as that sometimes he is loathed by his own kith and kin? It is that whiteness which invests him, a thing expressed by the name he bears. The albino, as well made as other men, has no substantive deformity, and yet this mere aspect of all-pervading whiteness makes him more strangely hideous than the ugliest abortion. Why should this be so? So even Herman Melville, in explaining or in using Captain Ahab and using the characters of Ahab and Moby Dick, is explaining his own disgust for his skin color, for his lack of pigmentation, his own disgust for whiteness, in which Dr. Welsing has stated many times in her book, The ISIS Paper, that all white people unconsciously or subconsciously or even consciously share this feeling of inferiority, this feeling of ugliness, this feeling of a lack of genuineness or relevance. Basically, they see white as inferior to blackness because they understand that they are not original, according to Dr. Welsing. So Melville's Captain Ahab sees the white whale as all evil of which he is in pursuit. In a letter to Nathan Hawthorne, Melville referred to Moby Dick as a wicked book. My own interpretation of the symbolism in this novel, which has been regarded as the greatest of all American novels, is that the crippled white Captain Ahab represents the mutant global white population affected with albinism or whiteness. The white whale is symbolic of racism or white supremacy, the major pursuit of the global white collective, the evil destructive goal of the global white collective. This furious evil pursuit in Moby Dick ends in a disaster for all, a deadly end in which the white ship captain and all of his crew, whites and non-whites alike, are destroyed. Yet one survived to tell the tale, foretelling the end of white supremacy as a specified power dynamic. So she also goes on to say, Melville's linkage of evil and dread with the condition of albinism parallels my own thesis that the absence of the neuropeptide melanin, the absence of this black pigment in the skin and other aspects of the nervous system critically impairs the depth sensitivity of the nervous system and the ability to tune into the total spectrum of energy frequencies in the universe. This deficiency of sensory awareness sets the stage for the absence of harmony, the chaos and destruction, which is evil. Thus, the injustice and evil of white supremacy not only has its foundation in the numerical minority status of the global white population and its genetically recessive status in terms of melanin pigment production, but the very absence of melanin in the nervous system in significant degrees decreasing sensory input, that sensitivity is an additional contributing factor in the problem of white supremacist injustice. White supremacy is the greatest known evil on earth. Likewise, racism and white supremacy is the unified force field that encompasses all of the lesser evils we now recognize. Indeed, if the absence of melanin obstructs the nervous system's ability to tune into the total spectrum of frequencies in the universe, rendering those lacking melanin incapable of acting in harmony with those frequencies, then it becomes incumbent upon those possessing melanin to counteract the evil. She's getting at when you lack melanin, you lack the ability to be in contrast you are in contrast with the universe, but you lack the ability to be in concert, to be in harmony with the universe. And especially when you subscribe, for those whites who have subscribed to the system of white supremacy, they have subscribed to the evil. So their overall lack of harmony with the universe, with earth, with nature, leads to the destruction of the universe, of earth, of nature, and also the destruction of their greatest fear, the destruction of who they deem as their greatest enemy, the people who possess the greatest amount of melanin, black people, African people. And because black people or African people possess the greatest amount of melanin, they are the biggest threats to white genetic survival. So we have to understand that, and we have to protect ourselves. Hey, man, it's a good book. It's a real good book. It's a real good book giving you explanations about white supremacy and how they think and why they think and how they move and why they move and all those things there. So, hey, check it out. The ISIS Papers, The Keys to Colors, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. I'm enjoying this. So we got 2 more videos left in this. 2 more videos left in this, and we'll be done, and we'll be able to move on to our next book. So, hey, man, make sure you catch the next video coming up. And keep watching what I got going on. And happy Monday. Love y'all. See y'all later.